Welcome to the Dungeon Brew Coffee Tavern, where every cup tells a story, and every story starts with a sip. Join us on a journey of adventure, camaraderie, and of course, the finest brews, served hot and steeped in mystery. From dragons to ancient legends, we're brewing up more than just coffee. Today's tale begins as the Dungeon Brew crew travels to the bustling Smithfield gathering, where craftsmanship and knowledge are traded in equal measure. But as every seasoned traveler knows, the road home is never as simple as the road there. What begins as a day of learning and exchange soon turns to misfortune when a broken wagon leaves them stranded at the forest's edge, and desperate men see opportunity in their vulnerability. Yet not all encounters end in ruin, and not all enemies remain enemies when the truth is brought into the light. Now, grab your mug, settle in, and get ready for the next chapter in our brewing saga. Season 2, Episode 19, The Broken Wheel. Morning sunlight stretched across the winding road as the Dungeon Brew wagon rattled steadily toward the broad open plains known throughout the region as Smithfield. Every season, craftsmen, traders, inventors, and apprentices gathered there in a sprawling market of tents, forges, workshops, and demonstration circles where skill was traded as freely as coin. Even from half a mile away, the sounds carried clearly on the breeze, the ringing strike of hammers on anvils, the hiss of quenched steel, the cheerful clamor of merchants hawking wares, and the hum of eager conversation as knowledge passed from master to student. By the time the wagon crested the final hill, the gathering stretched before them like a small temporary city. Bright canvas awnings fluttered overhead, smoke curled upward from portable forges, and long rows of stalls overflowed with handcrafted goods of every sort. The air itself seemed alive with the mingled scents of worked leather, fresh-cut cedar, hot iron, baking pastries, and enough exotic spices to make Knives' nostrils flare in immediate interest.
Would you look at this place?
At last. Civilization.
If by civilization you mean 37 food stalls and at least 3 roasting spits, then yes, brother, I fully agree.
We've only just arrived, and somehow you've already counted the food vendors.
A warrior must remain observant.
And yet somehow appear oblivious to nearly everything else.
Bradicus placed a hand over his chest as though wounded by the remark, but the grin beneath his beard gave him away. He guided the wagon toward the designated trade lane while the others took in the spectacle around them. Blacksmiths demonstrated folding techniques to clusters of apprentices. Potters shaped elegant vessels at spinning wheels. Glassworkers coaxed molten brilliance into delicate forms while nearby herbalists lectured on preservation methods and infusion processes. For the Dungeon Brew crew, Smithfield was more than a market. It was a rare opportunity to gather ideas, tools, and techniques that might shape the future of their growing tavern.
All right, everyone. Same plan as we discussed. Meet back at the wagon by sundown.
If anyone touches the spice ledger I purchased for reference, I will know.
How exactly?
Because I shall have counted the pages.
That is deeply unsettling.
The group scattered into the bustling crowd, each drawn toward their own interests. Java drifted almost immediately toward a polished copper brewing display where a dwarven artisan demonstrated a pressure kettle capable of extracting flavor with remarkable efficiency. His wide golden green eyes reflected every glint of the shining apparatus as he peppered the craftsman with questions. Ed, meanwhile, had caught the unmistakable scent of smoked peppers and vanished toward a spice preservation pavilion with the speed of a dragon on a personal mission. Patches made her way toward the ceramicist's circle, where rows of beautifully glazed storage vessels sat displayed beside demonstrations on heat retention and moisture control. And Fate moved silently through the gathering with no obvious destination at all, her gaze lingering not on the stalls themselves, but on the markings etched into old tools, weathered carvings, and symbols half hidden beneath years of use. As for Bradicus, he followed his heart. Unfortunately for everyone else, his heart had led him directly to the pastry stalls.
Fresh honey twists, cinnamon rolls, maple glazed.
I'll take 6.
6 of which?
Yes.
Hours passed in productive exploration. Java carefully sketched designs for modified brewing coils. Patches purchased a small but remarkably sturdy ceramic silica compound after an enthusiastic demonstration involving a cracked kettle and considerable shouting. Nived found himself engaged in a surprisingly heated argument with a pepper merchant over proper drying temperatures.
Low heat preserves complexity.
Low heat invites weakness.
You'll scorch the oils.
Then they lacked conviction.
Nearby onlookers slowly formed a circle around the debate, some nodding thoughtfully as if witnessing an academic symposium, while others simply enjoyed watching two deeply opinionated culinary experts glare at one another over trays of peppers. Elsewhere, Bradicus had somehow volunteered for a blacksmithing demonstration.
Now then, the trick is control. Gentle, measured strikes.
Understood.
The resulting blow landed with such force that the practice horseshoe launched clean over the instructor's shoulder and embedded itself in a hay bale 20 feet away. It was quickly drenched in water to prevent fire.
Remarkable power.
Thank you.
By late afternoon, the shadows had begun to stretch long across Smithfield. One by one, the companions returned to the wagon carrying their purchases, notes, and discoveries. Java carefully secured a bundle of brewing schematics. Patches stowed her ceramic compound. Nived guarded several packets of rare dried spices as though they were royal treasure. Fate climbed silently into the wagon, her expression thoughtful. Bradicus arrived last, balancing a stack of wrapped pastries so tall he could barely see over them.
Bradicus, what is all that?
Emergency provisions.
For what emergency?
Hunger.
That is not necessarily an emergency.
Spoken like someone holding no pastries.
As the sun dipped lower, the Dungeon Brew crew turned their wagon toward home. Behind them, Smithfield still buzzed with the fading energy of the day's gathering. Ahead, the forest road waited in gathering dusk. And though none of them yet realized it, the lessons of Smithfield were far from over. As the last of Smithfield's noise faded behind them, the Dungeon Brew wagon rolled steadily along the western road beneath the warm glow of a sinking sun. The open plains gradually gave way to denser stretches of woodland, where towering oaks cast long shadows across the path and the evening air carried the earthy scent of moss, bark, and cooling stone. Inside the wagon, the companions settled into the familiar rhythm of travel, their newly acquired treasures tucked safely into crates as they reflected on the day's discoveries.
I maintain that these pastries were a practical investment.
You purchased enough to provision a siege.
Exactly. Preparedness.
Preparedness for what?
Unexpected hunger.
That is just regular hunger.
There is nothing regular about hunger. It is relentless. Unforgiving. A foe that strikes without warning.
And yet somehow, you always seem to know precisely when it will attack.
Bradicus laughed and placed a hand solemnly over his chest before reaching for another pastry, clearly determined to face this terrible enemy head-on. At the front of the wagon, Java carefully unrolled the brewing schematics he had acquired, his eyes bright with possibility as he traced diagrams of copper coils and pressure chambers with one claw.
If I widen the chamber feed and adjust the pressure valve, we could get a cleaner extraction without oversteeping.
Assuming you do not repeat your charred espresso incident.
That was one time.
The smoke could be seen from 3 hills away.
Bradicus still drank it.
A warrior accepts all challenges.
You added honey and called it rustic.
Improvisation is the soul of craftsmanship.
Patches sat nearby, turning over the small ceramic sealant jar she had purchased. The demonstration at Smithfield had been impressive, and she was already imagining the ways it might reinforce the tavern's storage vessels. Across from her, Fate sat quiet and unusually distant, her silver-gray eyes fixed beyond the wagon toward the darkening forest. Java noticed first.
You've been quiet since we left.
I'm thinking,
A risky pastime for some.
not frequent enough for others.
Bradicus nodded in agreement and Nived smirked openly. Java leaned back slightly.
Something bothering you?
The carvings I found today,
On those old smithing tools?
yes. They were older than the tools themselves. Much older.
Meaning?
Someone repurposed them. Symbols like those are not decorative.
Perhaps someone simply had aggressive artistic opinions.
No. I don't think so.
Her answer came flat and certain, enough to quiet the wagon for several moments as the wheels rattled over the uneven road. The forest thickened around them. Evening shadows stretched longer across the path, and the cheerful chatter of birds slowly gave way to the hush of approaching night. Then, without warning, the sound exploded beneath them. The front of the wagon dropped hard to one side as timber splintered and metal shrieked against stone. Everyone was thrown violently sideways as the left wheel tore free from the axle and shot down the road, bouncing wildly before vanishing into the underbrush with a heavy crash. The wagon slammed into the dirt with enough force to send crates tumbling, spice packets bursting open, and Bradicus's carefully guarded pastry bundle flying through the air like startled birds. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then,
My provisions.
Forget your provisions, the axle snapped.
And the pastries were innocent bystanders.
Everyone all right?
I think so.
Java carefully climbed free from the tangle of supplies and dropped to the road to inspect the damage. The front axle had split near its center, the wood fractured jaggedly through its weakest point. One support brace had twisted loose, and without the missing wheel, the wagon leaned helplessly into the dirt. Nived joined him, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the break.
Well,
It's bad.
how bad?
Walking home while dragging a broken wagon through the forest bad.
I have a hammer.
That is not a solution.
It has solved many things. You might be surprised.
Nearby, Patches checked the horses, soothing their nerves and confirming they were unharmed. They snorted anxiously but remained steady. Fate stepped down from the wagon last. Her boots touched the road softly as she scanned the darkening tree line. The forest had gone unnaturally still. No birds. No insects. No rustling branches. Only silence. A silence that felt as though it were listening.
You sense something?
Fate's gaze remained fixed on the shadows between the trees.
We need to repair this quickly,
Why?
because we are not completely alone.
The words settled over the group like a sudden drop in temperature. Around them, the forest road stretched in both directions beneath the dimming blue of early evening, boxed in by dense stands of oak and pine that seemed to lean ever closer as the light faded. The silence pressing in from the trees was unnatural, too complete to be comforting, and every member of the Dungeon Brew crew felt it. Java gave the dark woods one uneasy glance before forcing his attention back to the broken wagon.
Then standing around staring at each other seems like a poor use of time.
A rare moment of practical wisdom.
I have those occasionally.
The group sprang into motion. Java knelt beside the broken axle, carefully examining the jagged split while Nived climbed into the supply bed and began rummaging through crates with increasing intensity. Patches gathered scattered tools from the roadside while Bradicus disappeared into the brush in search of the missing wheel. Fate remained watchful at the edge of the road, her sharp gaze sweeping the darkening forest. After several tense minutes, Bradicus emerged triumphantly from the undergrowth, dragging the wheel behind him. He was also covered in burrs, twigs, and what appeared to be an entire fern lodged in his beard.
Recovered and intact.
You appear to have fought the forest itself.
It fought dishonorably.
Hold still.
Patches deftly plucked several leaves and a very indignant beetle from his beard.
Thank you.
There may still be one living in there.
Then he has chosen his home poorly, but with good taste and will be evicted in due time.
Java looked up from the axle, his expression focused.
The split is bad, but not impossible. If we can brace both sides and seal the fracture, it might hold long enough to get us back.
Fortunately, we acquired several useful supplies today.
The little red dragon began unloading their purchases onto the road with the intensity of a battlefield quartermaster, laying each item out in quick succession: iron brackets from a smithing stall, lengths of treated cord, a narrow cedar support beam Java had purchased for brewing modifications, and finally Patch's ceramic sealant compound. The small jar caught what little light remained as Patches held it up for inspection.
The vendor said it bonds like stone once heated.
Then perhaps the man was not exaggerating for profit.
A shocking business model.
Java positioned the cedar brace carefully against the fractured axle while Bradicus held it steady with both hands. Nived secured iron brackets along either side, his claws moving with precise efficiency as he tightened them into place, while Patches spread the pale gray sealant across every crack and seam with careful, practiced motions. Once the compound was applied, all eyes turned toward Nived as he drew himself up and narrowed his focus on the repair.
Stand back.
How far back?
Far enough that if this goes poorly, I do not have to hear your complaints.
Nived inhaled deeply and released a controlled stream of heat over the repaired axle. The sealant hissed and bubbled as it cured, hardening into a smooth stone-like shell around the wood and metal braces. When the heat faded, the group leaned in for inspection. Java gave the axle an experimental shove. It held firm.
That might actually work.
Of course it will.
I contributed significantly by standing here.
You did,
Thank you.
in large part by blocking the wind.
Bradicus frowned thoughtfully as he considered whether this qualified as praise, but before he could decide, Fate's voice cut across the road with quiet certainty.
We have company.
Every head turned toward the roadside where Fate stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the dark trees beyond the ditch. At first, the forest appeared empty, but then movement betrayed itself as shadows slipped between trunks and the faint crunch of leaves carried through the stillness. One figure shifted farther back, then another, and another after that, until the watching shapes became impossible to ignore.
How many?
At least 6.
That feels excessive for polite visitors.
Then it is fortunate we were not expecting politeness.
Bradicus reached for the heavy traveling hammer strapped beside the wagon seat while Patches quietly loosened the short staff at her side. Java slipped several small pouches from his satchel and held them ready as Nived lowered his stance, a faint curl of smoke escaping his nostrils. The shadows shifted once more before their owners finally stepped from the tree lean into the fading evening light. They wore rough leather armor pieced together from mismatched scraps, their blades old but sharp enough to threaten, their faces half hidden behind strips of dark cloth. At their center stood a broad-shouldered man carrying a curved short sword and the easy grin of someone who believed he had found stranded travelers too desperate to resist. The Dungeon Brew crew formed a line before their crippled wagon as the forest closed in around them, and with slow, deliberate steps, the bandit leader approached. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
Adventurers, travelers, and coffee lovers alike. Welcome to Dungeon Brew Coffee. Whether you crave the boldest brew, a magical chai, or a sweet spice cider, we've got something to fuel every quest. Sip it at home with our online blends, or catch us live at events across Virginia, and soon in West Virginia and North Carolina, as we bring the Tavern experience straight to you. And here's a little extra loot for your journeys. Keep your lemonade cup and bring it back to any event we're at and save $1 on your refill. That's one more treasure for your pocket. So, whether you're chasing dragons or deadlines, make Dungeon Brew Coffee your first stop, because every great day begins with a magical cup in hand.
And now, back to our show. The bandit leader stopped several paces from the wagon, his boots settling into the dust of the road as his companions spread outward behind him in a loose half-circle. They moved with the casual confidence of men who had done this before, each one positioning themselves carefully to cut off escape while keeping enough distance to avoid any desperate counterattack. The fading evening light cast long shadows across their worn armor and nicked blades, but their expressions were clear enough. They had expected frightened merchants, not a line of companions standing their ground. The leader's grin widened as his eyes swept over the wagon and its cargo.
Looks like fortune smiled on us tonight. Broken axle, stranded travelers, no patrols for miles. Hand over your coin, your supplies, and anything worth trading, and perhaps we all walk away happy.
I feel compelled to point out that your definition of happiness seems highly one-sided.
I wasn't asking for debate.
A pity. I had several observations regarding your appalling negotiation strategy.
You have courage for such a small creature.
And you have confidence for someone dressed like failed upholstery.
A ripple of muffled laughter escaped from somewhere behind the Dungeon Brew line. Even Patches failed to suppress a small smile. The bandit leader's grin twitched.
Last chance.
Counteroffer. You leave now, and we all pretend this was an unfortunate misunderstanding.
No. I think not.
Worth trying.
The leader raised his sword and gave a sharp flick of his wrist, and that single motion was all the signal his men needed as they rushed forward at once, boots pounding against the dirt road as the quiet forest suddenly exploded into motion. Java reacted first, hurling one of the small pouches from his satchel directly into the advancing front line. The packet burst against the dirt in a violet cloud of fine silver powder that flared brilliantly the instant it struck open air, flooding the road with a blinding flash like a miniature sunrise and sending 3 bandits stumbling backward, crying out as they clutched at their eyes.
Experimental brewing catalyst. Still working out the proportions.
Remind me never to sample your mistakes again.
Before the blinded men could recover, Nived launched himself skyward with a sharp beat of his wings and spun through the air, exhaling a concentrated burst of finely ground spice dust directly into their faces. The results were immediate and spectacular as coughing, sneezing, and panicked wheezing overtook the attackers. One dropped his blade entirely while tears streamed down his face.
What in blazes is that?
Smoked fire root, ghost pepper, and just a whisper of dragon's breath resin. A balanced blend.
Have you named it yet?
I am considering regret.
On the opposite side of the road, another bandit lunged toward Patches with surprising speed, but she sidestepped with effortless grace, caught his wrist, and redirected his momentum with practiced precision. The attacker pitched forward helplessly and landed face first in the roadside ditch with a startled grunt. Without missing a beat, Patches brought the base of her staff down firmly against the back of his shoulder, pinning him where he fell.
You should rest.
Closer to the wagon, Bradicus met 2 charging attackers head-on, his traveling hammer sweeping in a broad defensive arc that forced both men backward as their blades glanced harmlessly from the heavy steel head. One tried to circle behind him, and Bradicus pivoted to meet him, only for his boot to catch against the discarded wheel lying near the road's edge. He stumbled, but the sudden impact sent the wheel tipping upright and rolling forward with surprising speed until it slammed directly into the bandit's knees. The man yelped and crumpled into the dirt. Bradicus looked down at him with measured satisfaction.
Exactly as planned.
Didn't you trip?
A deceptive maneuver.
The second bandit hesitated just long enough for Bradicus to recover his footing and introduce him decisively to the flat side of the hammer, sending him sprawling unconscious to the road. Nearby, Fate moved through the conflict with unsettling precision, never striking first and never wasting movement. She flowed from one position to the next as though she had already seen every attack before it was made. One bandit slashed toward her, and she stepped neatly aside before the blade had fully committed. Another lunged from her flank, only for her staff to rise smoothly and redirect the strike harmlessly into empty air. A third advanced with visible determination, but the instant her silver-gray eyes locked onto his, something in his expression faltered. Whatever he saw there was enough to unravel his courage, and he quickly backed away.
I don't like her.
Then stop looking at her and fight.
Frustration finally drove the leader himself into the fray as he charged straight for Java near the wagon. Java's eyes widened as he fumbled for another pouch, but the bandit closed the distance too quickly. Before the blade could fall, Fate appeared between them with such seamless speed it seemed the shadows themselves had carried her there. Her staff cracked sharply against the leader's wrist, sending his sword spinning from his grasp to land several feet away in the dirt. He stared at her in stunned disbelief.
How did you?
You told me by your threads.
Before he could recover, Bradicus stepped forward and planted the broad steel head of his hammer firmly against the man's chest. Around him, his companions were scattered across the road in varying states of defeat, some coughing helplessly through Nived's spice cloud, others groaning where they had fallen, and several staring with growing unease at the small red dragon whose nostrils still released faint curls of smoke.
I would advise rethinking your evening plans.
The confidence drained visibly from the leader's face as he finally took in the full scene before him and realized that the stranded travelers he had expected to rob had proven to be very much the wrong sort of prey. The bandit leader stood rigid beneath the broad steel face of Bradicus's hammer as his eyes swept across the road and took in the full consequences of his mistake. His men were scattered in various states of defeat, some coughing helplessly from Nived's spice cloud, others sprawled in the dirt or rubbing watering eyes, and all of them looking considerably less certain of themselves than they had moments before. The confidence that had carried them from the treeline was gone, replaced by the sober realization that the stranded travelers before them were far more formidable than appearances had suggested.
All right. We surrender.
A wise and commendable decision.
Bradicus held his position for another moment before lowering the hammer and stepping back. Around him, the others eased their stances, though none lowered their guard completely. As the defeated bandits slowly rose and gathered themselves, one younger figure remained seated awkwardly near the roadside ditch where Patches had dropped him. His hands trembled visibly as he stared at the dirt beneath his boots, his patched clothing and gaunt frame making it clear he had seen harder days than most. Patches approached him carefully, her voice gentler than the tension of the moment might have suggested.
Are you hurt?
No, I'm not injured.
Then why are you shaking?
Because Garrett told us this would be easy.
Several uncomfortable glances passed between the bandits. The leader, evidently Garrick, grimaced and looked away.
That's enough, Tavern.
It's true.
The exchange shifted the mood immediately. What had moments earlier seemed like a clean roadside ambush now looked considerably more complicated. Java noticed the worn condition of their boots and gear. Nived observed the crude stitching and repeated repairs in their clothing. Patches saw the unmistakable signs of recent hunger etched into their thin faces. Even Bradicus's expression softened as the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Fate regarded the leader with her usual steady calm.
You are not practiced thieves.
No. You could say that we're new to this career choice.
Not very good at it either. You are desperate men making poor choices.
That's about the size of it.
The leader let out a slow breath and finally offered the truth. Trade had shifted east after a bridge collapse months earlier, leaving nearby settlements struggling and opportunities for work increasingly scarce. What began as odd jobs and temporary labor had dwindled into nothing, and desperation had driven them toward the road in hopes of surviving one more week. The Dungeon Brew crew exchanged thoughtful glances.
Well, that is considerably less satisfying than discovering you were all cartoonishly evil.
It does complicate proper moral outrage.
They still tried to rob us.
Yes, but perhaps there's a better solution than sending them away empty-handed.
As she spoke, her eyes drifted toward the broken wagon axle and then back toward the bandits. A quiet understanding spread across the group as the idea formed.
How many of you know wagon repair?
Most of us.
Then help us fix this properly and we'll pay you fairly, feed your people, and point you toward honest work near the crossroads.
Why would you do that?
Because your current career path appears unsustainable.
Also because Patches would glare at us if we refused.
The offer clearly caught them off guard. Garrick studied each of their faces in turn, searching for mockery or deception and finding neither. At last, he gave a slow nod and accepted. What followed transformed the quiet forest road into an unlikely workshop as former attackers and intended victims worked side by side beneath the rising moon. Timber was measured and cut, braces reinforced, supports reset, and fresh bindings secured with far greater care than the group's original roadside repair. Nived supervised the sealant work with exacting precision, correcting technique with relentless commentary that none dared challenge. Java supplied tools and held fittings in place while Patches checked bruises and minor injuries sustained during the fight. Bradicus reluctantly distributed pastries among the workers, each offering given with visible internal struggle. Even Fate joined the effort, though her attention occasionally drifted toward the dark woods as though listening for something only she could hear. By the time the repairs were complete, the wagon stood stronger and more stable than it had before the axle ever broke. Java tested the wheel thoroughly and gave an approving nod.
That should carry us home.
And then some.
True to their word, the Dungeon Brew crew paid the men fairly and marked out the safest route to settlements near the crossroads where labor was always in demand. As the two groups prepared to part ways, the young bandit lingered awkwardly near the wagon.
Thank you.
Try to avoid armed robbery in the future. It rarely makes for lasting friendships.
I think we're done with that.
An excellent professional adjustment.
At last, the wagon rolled once more onto the moonlit road, its newly repaired axle carrying them steadily toward home as open fields replaced the dense forest around them. The companions settled back into their seats, the tension of the evening giving way to quiet reflection.
Not exactly the lesson I expected from Smithfield.
On the contrary, craftsmanship is solving problems under pressure.
And ideally doing so with pastries.
You're almost out.
Then this evening has cost us dearly.
Warm laughter filled the wagon as it rolled beneath the stars, but at the front, fate's attention fixed silently on an ivy-covered roadside marker they passed in the dark. Carved faintly into its weathered surface was the same ancient symbol she had seen etched into the antique tools at Smith Field, and though she said nothing to the others, the troubled focus in her silver-gray eyes made it clear that whatever mystery had revealed itself that day was far from over.
Don't forget to hit the like button.
Yeah! And maybe drop a comment. It's like getting something in the mail. Gotta love getting some mail from your friends, right?
Maybe they don't like us, Nived. You shouldn't expect everyone to like us.
Not like us? Inconceivable. Who doesn't like a team as amazing as us? Or baby dragons at the very least.
We must let them decide. We can only play our part. And hope.
The fire is low, the mugs are empty, and tonight's tale has come to an end. But the journey is far from over. Thank you for gathering with us at Dungeon Brew Coffee Tavern, where adventure brews with every sip. Join us next time as new challenges arise, mysteries deepen, and the magic of the tavern unfolds. If you enjoyed this taste of adventure, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a new episode. We'll save a seat for you at the tavern. See you soon.